Now, as we continue with thinking about the members of the Frankfurt School, I talked a little bit about the first generation, namely just talked about Adorno. Shifting to a key thinker of the second generation is Jürgen Habermas. So, chapter 5, still in that from Adorno to Bourdieu. Habermas fits in here. Second generation, the key guy of the second generation of the Frankfurt School. So now, he too is looking for a solution to ideology, but he doesn't have quite the same view of ideology that Adorno does, and so he's not going to have quite the same notion of a solution. But he thinks that we need one. Okay, so remember, Adorno thought, that one of the things that we had was the tendency of thought in its positive dialectics to scoop everything, combine everything, get rid of the other, suppressing differences, this violent tendency to control, manipulate, and then homogenize, right? Kind of this, just the blob. Thought is like the blob that ate everything. And that's sort of the old school, the positive dialectics. We need a negative dialectics that, gets rid of the blob, opens up differences. We live and celebrate differences, et cetera, et cetera. And how do we do that? Art is going to do it. Nope, says Habermas. That's not how it works. Really, it's going to be through communicative language. So he's more of a linguistic kind of guy. And sometimes he's accused of being a rationalist. That's not totally fair, not totally unfair either. But in any case, he's got more, I think, in common with linguists, people who think that there are deep levels of rationality and grammar in how we speak. Okay, but that's getting ahead of the story. Let's look a little bit more at what he thinks ideology is. Well, it's not surprising. If he thinks the solution is in language, he probably thinks the problem is in language. And that's why he's sometimes called sort of kind of got idealist tendencies, rationalist tendencies, because he's looking for these deep structures. Okay, so what's ideology? Well, it's a systematically power distorted form of communication, right? It sounds a lot like propaganda and whatnot, but it is a form of communication. That's what we do. We're a species, says Habermas, that has an interest in communicating, right? We're basically, that's how we survive. We survive through communicating. Maybe in a different way, you could say he's just building on the old notion that we are social creatures and we communicate. Every creature that is social in nature communicates, right? Bees, all kinds of sorry, my dog kicked the stand. Okay. Anyways, just a second. I got to straighten that out a little bit. So there we go. So we like bees, ants. I mean, they communicate in different ways. They have chemical communication. Trees communicate. So all social creatures have interests, and they communicate those interests to each other, and they survive through them. Like trees help each other, and so we all do. So all communication is interest driven, right? And so they're all and so when we look up things, when we study things and all that, it's all interest driven. Okay, so but so it's not something that ideology is particular. Oh, it's interest driven. No, all communication is. But this is a power distorted form of communication. So that's a key thing you want to keep in here, that it's power distorted, right? And what does that mean? Well, I put a little asterisk here. This systematically power distorted form of communication becomes a medium of domination, right? And we've seen this in a variety of thinkers, right? And we'll see it again with Bourdieu and whatnot, that it's all about symbols and communication, which create the possibilities and impossibilities of ways in which to think. So this medium of domination and serves to legitimate relations of organized force. Again, we've seen that serves to universalize things, and the dreaded one, it serves to naturalize things, so that things just become things that are artificial and are engendered by certain social conditions, eventually become naturalized, where they're seen as just, well, that's just natural. That's what reason dictates, and everything. And all these things are actually communicative products, right? And you don't see the distorting factors. Now, you might think, and Eagleton does a nice sort of leading you down a path into this dystopia of this nightmare of you can't see the factors, you can't see anything, it's blind, and you're so blind that you don't even know that you're in some sort of ideological prison. You don't even know, because the distorting factors aren't visible at all, that you have no metric. You can't make anything. You just live in it, right? You might even think you're happy, but in the end, you're this happy person in this miserable, oppressive structure. No, that's not quite. I mean, well, if Habermas thought that, there wouldn't be much interest in reading anymore, because it's all just distorted and you don't know it. But he doesn't say that. He doesn't end up in that dystopic vision. This is why people sort of think, you got a little bit of rationalism in you. He says something like this. Again, this is simplification. But logically speaking, if we're going to talk, if we are going to talk about systematic distortions, and we're going to talk about this, we must have some kind of inkling. There must be something, right, that we have to, if we say language is twisted out of the true, we must have some inkling of what real communication and what the true sort of is, right? There's got to be something there. So we have some inkling of the true, what authentic communication is. And so what should we be doing? Well, we should be looking really at our practices. We don't have abstract and all these kinds. We don't have, basically, we don't have transcripts of angelic conversations. We have just our own. And so let's look at that and see if we can pull out something that we can use to help communicate better. So we study communication in order to find out something, that maybe the nuggets that are buried in it. Kind of like sluicing for gold, right? And so we examine our linguistic practices in order to extract some kind of what Habermas calls a communicative rationality. Now, again, as I've been stressing, for Habermas, you're not going to get some pure language or whatever, some absolute blueprint that if you follow it, everything's going to be great. All language is free. All language has interests. All activities and all pursuits of knowledge have interests built into them in a variety of ways. Again, that's what we are. We are biological creatures that have interests, and that comes out in our reasoning and everything. It doesn't come from on high or whatever. It's just the way we are. We are creatures that have interests, and all our language is full of interests. None of it is free of interest. Reason is always interested. It's always got a direction. But reasons, this sort of interested reason, if you want to call it that, that's not a bad thing. Right? It can do good things. Interest should be seen as part of knowledge, right? And because again, we don't have God's eye view, we don't have angelic pictures of the world. We're flesh and blood creatures with interests, and that's bound up with things. That's not a bad thing. What do the interests do, right? So for Habermas, a crucial thing is interests that are all of knowledge is bound up with interests. Some of these interests open up. They lead to more openness. They lead to more inquiries. So yes, you could say science is full of interest, but it also leads to opening up inquiries. Lots of inquiries are interest. They have interest throughout them, but they open up. They create more things. Every protest group has an interest driven. Do they open up more possibilities? Do they free? Are they emancipatory? Those interests are what Habermas would say, those are good ones, right? That's good, right? So interests are there. Let's have the good ones. Bring on the good ones. Let's support the good ones. The ones that are emancipatory, they emancipate, they open up, great. The ones that close down, that's your ideological notion. So in a sense, it resembles more or less this notion that we saw in our previous thinker, Adorno. So these guys, same school. So he's like looking at, like in a way, Adorno, that ideology is kind of a homogenizing, a shutting of things down, and to, opening things up, which is what art does. It's similar, structurally, these guys are kind of singing from the same play, from the same hymn book, in that when things are being closed down, closed off, that's bad. That's ideological, right? So in that sense, Habermas is definitely in line with Adorno, at least insofar as this discussion of ideology. Okay, but Habermas is a big, expansive, creative, and complex thinker, and has lots of stuff on ideology. Not all of this will fit with everything he says, but that gives you a rough idea of what it's about and how, it makes sense to think of him as part of the Frankfurt School as well. Okay, and then Eagleton goes on to about a bunch of other stuff. He pulls in things about Habermas and his emancipatory discourse and its relationships or its analogies with psychoanalysis. So you can have a look at that, and he dives a bit into Freud as well, another important thinker. Fortunately, I won't be talking about him, at least in this round of lectures. And then eventually we'll turn back to Althusser, who we've seen in the book, and I'll return to that very soon in the next video. See you then.